Recording in progress.
I call the regular meeting of the City of Ashland Planning Commission to order for February 10th, 2026. I will note that our meetings are available on Zoom and on RVTV. The public can find information on how to participate in the Planning Commission meetings in our public notices, as well as directions on how to find the full meeting materials, applications, and staff reports. I do note that we have 6 of the 7 members present, so we do have a quorum, and we have our council liaison. Welcome. Announcements. Brandon, do you have anything for us?
Thank you, Chair Werner. A couple announcements. Wanted to note that our planner, Veronica Allen, is no longer with the city, having taken a position in the city of Salem. So we will miss her, but glad that she was able to advance her career as well as move closer to family. I did want to note that we do have that open position advertised on the city website right now, open through February 25th. Also wanted to note in terms of current land use applications that don't come before the Planning Commission, we did have a demolition issued through the Southern Oregon University Master Plan for the housing units off of Hersey Street. And so those properties received that demolition permit and the dilapidated homes have been removed. Redevelopment of that site will trigger a planning action and will come back before the Planning Commission. We've yet to receive any pre-application for development of those.
Did you say Hersey or Henry?
I'm sorry, I did say Hersey, but it's. You meant Henry. I meant Henry.
Okay.
I can't read my writing, so thank you. And that property, you'll remember, is one of the properties in the SOU master plan, was indicated for as a surplus property by the university with the intention of selling it for redevelopment. Additionally, at 2262 Ashland Street, this is a project that came before the Planning Commission for demolition of the commercial office building there and the reconstruction with commercial buildings. That demolition permit has been issued, and so the demolition will begin. In terms of other type 1 planning actions, again, these are those that are approved at the staff level, but as they're commercial in nature, wanted you to be aware of an addition to the property at 500 A Street. Worth driving by and look at the remodel and addition and a rooftop deck that was added to that building. And you've probably all walked past 27 North Main, which is the new Cafe Lumina, which is now open and did a historically compatible renovation of their front facade. And so I just wanted to make note of those, and that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Gives us all something to do. Okay, we have a consent agenda of several minutes. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, or do you have changes to be made? Russell?
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So moved. And public forum, if you wish to speak to the Planning Commission on something that is not on our agenda, please fill out the pink form that's on the side of the wall as you came in. Anybody interested in speaking to us on an item that's not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on. We are moving on to a continuation of a type 2 public hearing from January 13th for action PA-T2-2025-00065 at 431 North Main Street. This is an application for approval of a 4-lot PSO subdivision with outline and final plan, 4 CUPs to extend the MPFA, the maximum permitted floor area, in a historic district for each lot, a tree removal permit for a significant tree, which is 33 inches in diameter, and an exception to street standards to not install street improvements due to the existing sidewalk and street site constraints. The public hearing was opened on January 13th and was continued to tonight to allow for the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee to review this item and make a recommendation. I will ask commissioners if they've had any ex parte contact. Commissioner Herron?
No ex parte.
Commissioner Lininger?
No ex parte.
Commissioner McCracken Jen?
No ex parte.
Commissioner Mar?
No ex parte.
Commissioner Phillips?
No ex parte.
Okay, and I have not had any either, so we're good to go on that front. I will acknowledge that we have received additional written material and testimony from the applicant in the form of a couple memos and drawings on January 12th, January 28th, and tonight. And we've also received additional written testimony from Adam and Susan Lemon, the innkeepers at Abigail's Inn and Bed and Breakfast across Hersey Street from the project. To continue the public hearing, I will turn to staff to give us an update on HPAC's recommendation.
Okay. As Chair Werner mentioned, this is a continued hearing for 431 North Main, addressing outline final plan, conditional use permit to exceed MPFA for all 4 lots, an exception to the street standards to not install standard frontage improvements due to existing sidewalks, and a request for tree removal. As we get into the continued hearing, where there were a couple of questions that came in from commissioners that I wanted to bring up in the record, just so you kind of have an idea, all of you, the same answers moving forward. So the first question that came from planning commissioners was, am I understanding correctly that AMC 1842050A2B is the primary provision that supports imposing design compatibility requirements or conditions for this project, given the maximum permitted floor area conditional use permit and Historic Preservation Advisory Committee's role? If there are other key code sections the commission should be leaning on, could you please point me to them? So first of all, this all arises out of the comprehensive plan, which calls for the city to develop and implement through law design guidelines for new development, as well as for the alteration of existing structures within the historic interest areas for structures and areas that are historically significant. And in Ashland, we have 4 National Register listed historic districts that are regulated. The Ashland Municipal Code 1825070 regulates maximum permitted floor area, and subsection C specifically gets to increases in allowable maximum permitted floor area, saying that a conditional use permit under Chapter 18.54 is required to exceed the MPFA of subsections 1825070F and G below. In addition to the approval criteria for a conditional use permit, the criteria for historic district design standards approval must be met. In no case shall the permitted floor area exceed the 25% overage of the MPFA. Conditional use permit approval criteria also specifically call out architectural compatibility with the impact area. And then finally, that section in 42050A2B speaks to there being authority in law for the staff advisor and planning commission to require modifications in the designs to match the historic district development standards. So that's sort of the code basis for any sort of conditions addressing this, like the historic commission recommendations that'll be before you. The other question that came from commissioners to be considered here tonight, could staff provide examples of typical design-related conditions or modifications are often required for new construction in the historic districts? A short list would help to understand the practical range of what's commonly conditioned versus what's typically left to the building permit stage. So there really isn't a typical here, both because I think since COVID and middle housing, we've seen very few development applications in the historic districts. And for maximum permitted floor area particularly, we haven't seen any in quite a long time. So looking back through older approvals, I think generally you'll see that the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee's review is always based on a specific design considered in light of the design standards and then the site-specific context. So you have to look at not just what's proposed, but the surrounding neighborhood and how they fit as kind of measured through those design standards. I think looking back, the most recent or easiest to find really illustrative example was the buildings done at Lithia Way and First across from the post office, which aren't residential, but just the historic recommendations for those got to details like strengthened column on the southeast corner of the building next to the pedestrian passageway to create symmetry or symmetrical division of the Lithia Way facade, and then called out all of the design standards that related to that. Got to wrapping elements of architectural detail to the north side to create visual integrity with the south and west, and again called out 5 separate design standards that related to that whole condition. Strongly recommend using plaster on the east elevation instead of concrete. Joint lines should be used to continue horizontal and vertical rhythms, and then called out again specific standards that got to that. So we get to a fair level of detail in architectural recommendations where they can be tied to explicit standards. And so the historic district design standards, and I'm not sure if we've got them on the screen, so the historic district design standards in the code get to these sort of pictographic representations. But for instance, with massing, it talks about having varying masses consistent with historic buildings in the immediate vicinity and not single monolithic forms that are not relieved by variations in massing. So you saw in the initial recommendations from the Historic Commission talking about trying to segment the building design to get some variation in the street-facing facades, specifically to get to massing, or again, the roofing criteria here, the rhythm of openings, building form, the entrances, kind of all of these historic standards get looked at in the context of the surrounding neighborhood. And that's sort of what feeds the recommendations and the conditions to find compliance in terms of these standards with the actual context of the neighborhood. So again, you saw in the January recommendations, looking at the 3 units on the right here that were sort of all identical, the commission asked, rather than having them be cookie cutter, that they vary so that the one on the left on lot 3 would shift the location of the garage to the opposite side, just to provide some variation in that streetscape. And that was both because of the repetitive nature and the fact that the design standards generally discourage front-facing garages, but also the fact that 6 non-historic units immediately adjacent also have front-facing garages along this same corridor. And so the applicant, as you see here, made that change, flipping the garage, and the Historic Commission's February recommendations had no additional recommendation with regard to that. And again, the recommendations in January got to scale, massing, roof form, and entrances, and talked about how the gable could be treated and how segmentalization of the facade could happen. So you had that original submittal on the left here. Revisions received January 12th on the right, and then further revisions received on January 28th. And then through that Historic Commission meeting, they actually took these and made some sketches on there to illustrate their recommendations, which included combining the stairs on the North Main Street facade combining these 2 sets of stairs into one, at least 5 to 6 feet wide, with at least a 4 to 5 foot walkway, and treating similarly on Nursery Street. They noted they generally had preferred the gables to be at the eave level, as in the January 12th version. They asked that this dormer be enlarged on the west side, and that both dormers should be the same size. There should be no windows in the dormers, but vent louvers instead. The column placement should relate directly to the gable above, that there should be shingles in the gable dormers, and they recommended straight shingles rather than fish scale. That the Nursery Street hip portion should be enlarged as the gable steps back, as it presents to the north when approached from North Main. And the gable step back 2 to 3 trusses, at least 48 inches from the wall face and approximately 9 feet from the face of that eave on the porch. And they said that while a similar treatment would be good on the east side, they didn't feel that it was absolutely necessary for compatibility. In terms of the trees, another issue that was raised kind of after the original staff report, staff had done a site visit and provided you some recommendations. The applicant also provided an arborist report and ISA risk assessment. We have run those materials by the Tree Management Advisory Committee, and they had comments that are shown here generally in support of the removals requested. And the other issue that comes up on the tree is on this lot 3, when the garage location is switched to the opposite side here, the garage and driveway will conflict with the tree placement. So that tree removal becomes, I think, even more imperative. In terms of a staff recommendation, staff would recommend that should you choose to approve the application, you incorporate the Historic Commission recommendations, as I've kind of thrown the wording here, that the February 4th recommendations of the Historic Preservation Advisory be conditions of approval with recommended design modifications incorporated in the permit submittals for review by the review board, subject to final approval by staff advisor. And then just for reference, to remind you, in the presentation last month, there were a couple recommended condition changes to 7A to address the option for an irrevocable consent to dedicate easements, some additional detail on that storm drainage condition, and then it added conditions for the irrevocable consent to dedicate an easement for right-of-way, and a condition about mitigating measures for removal of the tree of heaven. And then the last thing I would add is that you do have in front of you now revisions that were just received tonight from the applicant that are seeking to respond to these recommendations directly. And the applicant is, I think, here to speak to those.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any commissioners have any questions for
Chair Brenner, I
staff?
have a question.
Sure.
Regarding the historic district design standards, you showed us, kind of the menu of the different standards that are associated with different shapes, from what I can tell. Do those shapes come with any numeric or other objective criteria, or is it just something we eyeball?
Those shapes are really to kind of illustrate the guiding principles that you're looking for in terms of how things fit within the surrounding neighborhood. So it's not a quantifiable objective standard. And where the state law typically calls for clear and objective standards with housing, it explicitly says that with regard to historic districts, you can have standards that don't meet those clear and objective standards.
Okay, and the newer HPAC recommendations are specific to the single-room occupancy building
Yes.
on what will be subdivided lot 4, is that right?
Right.
Could that subdivided lot fairly be characterized as a transitional area of the historic district?
So that's not how it was looked at by the Historic Commission. If you wanted to think about it that way, I think there's a basis for it, both in terms of there being commercial zoning across the street, E1, that is developed with some larger buildings that might make a larger building here more palatable. And then there's also just the fact that development along a neighborhood street where it fronts on a state highway, there's certainly a transitional area in terms of sort of the potential intensity that you'd see there. So both of those
It would be
things-
reasonable to say that it's not the same as the interior Skidmore Historic District neighborhood.
I think that's reasonable.
Thank you.
Susan?
So I was unclear. Should we take the recommendation of the Tree Advisory Committee as being a vote? It sounded like it was some opinions.
I can reference that. The Tree Management Advisory Committee is not a standing advisory committee or commission. They provide recommendations to staff, and staff typically provides their review to the Planning Commission for consideration. Through the intent of the Tree Management Advisory Committee is, we are fortunate to have a number of arborists and professionals that will evaluate applications and provide staff recommendation, and then we relay that to you. So we're in concurrence with the Tree Management Advisory Committee's findings that that tree has seen its life extended at this point. It's not dead, but it's in substantial decline and is in a location that could not be reasonably protected were the site to redevelop.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any members of the public wish to testify?
Amy has a slide that.
Right, I was waiting for applicant's rebuttal to call on her.
Are we allowed to ask a question?
If you wish to testify to the commission, you need to fill out the pink form in the back and come forward and introduce yourself. Okay, moving on. Applicant's rebuttal. Amy, it's your turn.
Good evening, Commissioners. I have a image of that picture that we just shared with you. So it can be depicted on the screen. Give me just a second. Sorry. It wants to start from the beginning. I'll just keep clicking through. So, following the extension of the meeting, we went back to the Historic Commission with the elevation that was presented at this hearing and shared with them the proposal, and then they expressed their additional concerns and changes that they would like to see to alleviate the mass of the roof was really the primary concern. And so following their meeting, these were the changes that were made to the building from this is what was proposed at your previous January meeting, and then this is the change that was made. So this roof was hipped back a couple of truss bays to decrease the mass of this gable on the nursery end of this building. The gable ends on the porch were made the same size as requested by the commission. The treatment on the porch posts is consistent with what the commission had requested. This is a wider opening, and the porch posts make more sense with the railing. There is still graphical issues with the limitations of the designer software. There's not a park row being proposed, so really what they did to address concerns that the commission had is they put the topo of the site in and set the building at the grade of the topography so that we could reflect the stepping here, and then this grade change over here, and the stem wall exposure is accurate, but the sidewalk and these things out here are not accurate. He only entered the topo data for the structure itself. But in the memo, it describes the average height or the height of the building in comparison to adjacent properties, and drills into the historic district design standard compatibility, the proposed changes to the building and how those comply. To speak to Commissioner Leininger's question about the transition zone, we didn't really address it like that because it's all within the Skidmore Academy Historic District. The criteria in the code does talk about transitions between zoning district boundaries, not just the boundaries of being in the historic district or out of the district or boundary of district to district. So it is truly a transitional area with the commercial zones across the street. This is multifamily, and then just up Nursery Street a bit is single-family residential zoning instead of multifamily. So those were the primary concerns that I believe came up to this commission. In my memo, I also responded to some of the other criteria from the conditional use permit that I think helps justify the reason for the requested maximum permitted floor area. One of the big things that this property has an advantage to is its proximity to the bus stops. They're about 170 feet away. There's stores within walking distance, restaurants. Downtown's not very far, so it has lots of transportation opportunities. And then also in the memo, it talks about the average house size in the neighborhood, and these units are definitely within a range of the average homes that are within this historic district. So that concludes my presentation. Don't want to spend too much time talking about all the other things we discussed last month unless there's questions.
Hi, Amy.
Hello,
Thanks for your service to the city.
thank you.
I just have a few questions. So the first one is, did you work with an architect?
We have a building designer. I don't know if he is an actual architect.
Could you tell me who that is?
Yeah, Carrick Roberge.
Okay. And then my next question is, did you complete a highest and best use assessment for the?
As far
Project.
as we looked at, like the density of it being a multifamily development, the density there is 4 point something units. I'm going to say 4.67. I'm not right off the top of my head. And so essentially we could do 4 dwelling units, or with density bonuses, maybe get up to 7. There's also the potential of if the units were less than 500 square feet, each one of them is 0.75 of a dwelling unit for density purposes. So again, off the top of my head, I believe it got about to 8-ish. So the proposal of 4 dwelling units is equivalent essentially to the allowed density as a multifamily zoned property without seeking any density bonuses.
Got it. And so that's the 4 parcels.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I was just curious, like, why SROs
Versus apartment complexes?
versus
Yeah.
a duplex or triplex, or, I mean, versus anything? Why SROs? I'm just curious.
The property owner's here, he could probably speak to that better.
Okay.
I believe that he retains ownership of units and has apartment rentals throughout Ashland. And so in order to help continue with renting out multiple units, he's got this SRO that he intends to retain ownership of, and then sell the other units essentially to pay for the cost of construction of the SRO.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't really answer the question why you would build apartments or, as something else that you would rent. I'm just curious,
Yeah,
as a
essentially there
developer.
could be 4 apartments there or 4 single-family home. So the return on the investment is that he's able to sell those and get it back. We went through whether he should keep them, rent them, how much it costs to build a multifamily versus how much you can rent it for, how long you have to carry the note for, all the different things. He did calculate that before he came to this decision.
Right, but I mean, just to clarify, you could put a duplex with an ADU on this lot, this front lawn, legally.
You could put,
A duplex plus an ADU, you could put?
No.
No?
no,
Can't
you-
Oh, okay.
the
So just,
lot.
you could just put a duplex?
Exactly, yes.
okay.
Each one of these lots could have 2 dwelling units on
Yeah,
them
yeah.
in the end. The lots are pretty small. They're pretty constrained. We couldn't figure out how you could put 2 units in.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, essentially, there could be duplexes on each lot as well, so there could be 8.
Okay. Let's see, what else I have? So, in general, I just think I should start by saying I'm very supportive of homes for first-time home buyers and also for apartments for people that make 60% to 100% AMI, which I think these SROs qualify. How big are they again?
The units, the bedrooms,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to tell you the wrong number, but I'm going to say around 200 and... Yeah, they're about 17 by 14 and a half.
So 325 square
Thank you.
feet.
And the designer recommended that there be no arterial hallway, that there just be, I understand it's outside of the scope of our jurisdiction, but I'm just curious. The designer recommended that there be perimeter access and not interior access.
That was done for a few reasons, primarily to allow individual restrooms within each bedroom unit, where if the hallway took up so much space within our limited area, that then the bedrooms got pretty small, and then we'd have shared bathrooms throughout the place. And,
Right, I mean, you could always reduce the number of units, but that was what was decided, like,
Correct.
yeah, okay, gotcha. Just trying to understand the logic. I think that's it, thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Eric?
Thank you. Where are they going to store their bicycle?
So there's an interesting hole in your ordinance that doesn't talk about bike parking for this sort of situation. So we have determined that there'll be U-racks for people to store a bicycle, and then we talked about having a hanging rack inside of each unit so people could have the secure location for their bikes.
How far off Main Street is the setback?
20 feet,
And off of Nursery?
Nursery?
10.
Doesn't look like it scales that way, but
Those are the setbacks.
that's not the way it's drawn there.
So like I said, this is a rendering of the elevations of the building primarily, and then they wanted to show the grade correctly.
Why didn't we get elevations of the building?
I don't know if those have been completed yet. This was a really quick reaction to the Historic Commission review of the building.
It looks like on the sketch that we saw earlier from the Historic Society, their sketch didn't quite match this. Can you explain the difference?
The sketch,
From your last meeting with the Historical Society with the red lines on it.
I think that is, let's see if I can get this to play. I think I might be frozen. I've made it really mad. I believe it's in the information, thank you, the memo from staff.
Included in the packet, information here, with the red lines.
Yeah.
You have it. The dormers are probably liquor.
Yeah, it's the dormers mostly.
The distinction between.
I mean, again, having just seen this tonight,
Yeah.
I think the dormers as depicted here may be a little bit smaller
Yeah.
than what had been redlined by the Historic Commission.
Yeah.
And really the intention of enlarging that dormer was to try to minimize how this gable feels so large as you're coming down Main Street from the north, approaching town, trying to minimize that gable by bringing that kind of piece there more into it to reduce the feel of it.
But shrunk the one on Main Street significantly.
Yeah, and the idea
there's
was
a-
that they would
and-
both
and
be
similar
equivalent size, so both
And-
would probably need to be a little bit larger than this.
And they don't have, yeah, they need to be larger, and they don't have the vent in it either. As it called out, didn't it call
Right.
out for?
Yeah,
vent?
but I mean, I think those are things, again, that the Historic Commission, when they did this, had suggested that this is something that could
Suggestions.
come back to them at review board, and they could confirm that. So I mean, I think as long as you condition as the Historic Commission requested, you could have this come back to review board for permits, and they could just confirm that those two gables are the size they wanted, those vents are in those sorts of details.
Gotcha. My concern is with 325 square feet of living space, you're not going to put a bicycle inside. You have no storage on the property. Stuff's going to be just put out in the yard and behind the handrail there. And there's been no architectural drawings provided. These are designer drawings, right? I mean, there's no architect has designed this building or been a part of the.
There's not an architecture required?
I didn't. See
Yeah,
there
there's,
was, but I'm
yeah,
just
there, no,
confirming.
he's a licensed building designer.
Okay, so, there's been no thought given to tenant storage or anything of that nature other than inside their 325 square foot space, correct?
It's not one of the criteria,
I
so
understand.
I
I'm
don't
just-
address it in
Okay.
the planning findings or anything, no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan?
So I've got a few questions here. I'm wondering if there's been any work to understand what the demand for SRO units is like in Ashland. I'm also wondering if the Historical Advisory Committee discussed the air conditioners, which are very visible and seem to me not in historical character with the neighborhood. And I'm interested in understanding, you called out well, the 6 factors of livability to be considered for a CUP, but you dismissed generation of traffic and effects on streets when there are likely to be up to 12 cars generated by the occupants of these units if there are 2 people per unit and they do have cars. So I'm just wondering why that was not identified as being relevant.
It is relevant to the extent of parking is not required on site anywhere within a half mile of frequent transit routes in town. And there's explicit discussion in the conditional use permit criteria that regardless of what the use is proposed, as long as it can be shown that there's pedestrian availability and potential increases if there's access to transit corridors and so forth, which is very true. There are sidewalks, walkways, bus stops, and there's now being parking provided for the single-family homes where there was no off-street parking provided for the 6 to 8 apartment units that were in there. So we're actually increasing the amount of parking provided, so decreasing the potential on-street parking. So we've got pedestrian connectivity to the transit corridor. We've got the high transit facilities, and that's addressed in the memo. And it talks about the 175 feet or so to the bus stop. So there's limits to how much we can talk about traffic impacts, and I don't feel that the conditional use permit additional square footage is necessarily going to be the reason why there's additional trips generated from these units. I don't believe that one could equate that there's additional trips being generated because there's a few hundred extra square feet with these buildings.
So that's your opinion? There hasn't been any additional study or?
There's not an additional study required, and actually state law explicitly talks about
Understand, we're
that.
all working through the new requirements of.
Right, so I believe I did address it in that there's, this is one of the best locations to have a higher density development like this, hence why our 2 districts are located along the main street, hence why there's a bus stop right across the street, there's commercial businesses directly across the street and within walking distance. This is probably one of the very best places in town for this type of development.
And my other 2 questions?
I'll have to, potentially the property owner can speak to it. I know that the other SRO type development at the corner of Park and Siskiyou that was recently built by Adroit doesn't have any vacancies and remains occupied. So that's really the only other example. And I don't know if there's other big ones in town, but I don't believe that it meets a housing type that the city has said that they need smaller rentable units. And I think it's just like one-bedroom apartments, you know, the city's rules say there lots of them are needed, but when people build them, they sit vacant for quite some time. So there is a demand for them. The units that are built are occupied, and there's, so Dan could possibly speak to it, but I believe that there is a demand for it.
What was your question?
Whether there's a demand for SROs.
Would you come forward, please, and speak into the microphone?
Sure.
Could you say your name?
What's that?
Say your name.
I'm Dan Doherty.
And you are,
I'm the owner of the property.
okay?
So I have other rentals in town. I have a property manager in town. I use brokers as well to buy these properties, and everybody tells me the same thing. There needs to be affordable housing. I mean, there's housing out there, but Ashland is definitely an interesting market. You could find a two-bedroom for up to $2,000, where in Medford you could find something for $1,000. So I mean, here, this is something that can be affordable. It's, 325 square foot. I think it's enough for one or two people to be able to live comfortably. Yeah, but I've heard from my property manager specifically that we're in need of, small units.
I had one more question that wasn't answered. The HVAC, visible HVAC units?
Sure, that has not been brought up. So we had 2 meetings with the Historical Commission, and it has not been mentioned. It's been in there since the first draft, so I believe if it was an issue, they would have addressed it. I mean, if it's not there.
I don't find it in historical character, but I'm not on the Historical Commission, so.
Right.
I think there's some, the Historic District Design Standards explicitly talk about new homes, new construction, modern elements, and that sort of thing.
And
Were other forms of air
That's what I was
conditioning
gonna
and
say.
management considered? Is that the only one?
Well, so to be able to fit in the building, I mean, that's, those are the most condensed units. Otherwise, there's going to be units on the outside. Like the actual, those are concealed as best possible. Otherwise, you're going to have, you see the mini split units, which the units are at least this big, and they're always outside. There's no way to put those inside.
We'd have 6 compressors somewhere on the outside of the building.
But not necessarily within public view.
Well, they could be on the backside of the building, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the backside, there's, that elevation doesn't show, but there's another 3 doors on the other side. Also in that, for some reason, they're white, and they wouldn't be white, they would blend in, they would be, we would get covers like the color of the doors that would match well. Sure.
Dan, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Dan. Don't you get an EFO rebate for your mini splits?
I'm sorry?
Don't you get a few $1,000s
You
for the mini splits?
Correct.
Yeah, I
Yep.
thought you did. Do you mind if I just ask you how much you're going to charge? I'm just curious.
We hope to get 1,000 per month.
Got it. I'm more curious just because, I'm trying to think about your logic about how you're targeting the market, because you're clearly, you're managing other property. So my firm manages 8 of these, and they were optimized for community sharing, kitchen, everything. And we spare no expense. Kitchens get very little use. I'm just giving you a little market feedback.
Sure.
And we have totally done everything that we can. That kitchen is not going to get used.
Right.
I can almost guarantee it. So it's just kind of a wink and a nod, to check the box. Did you, and I apologize if I asked this right, did you look at 2 stories? Why did you rule out 2 stories? Was it just purely budget, or?
There be occupancy types under the building code.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't do it with 2 stories. Is that right?
You can, but then you add an elevator
Oh,
element.
you have to have an elevator because of accessibility. Is that right? Okay,
I'm
sorry.
not positive.
That's our
I should know that.
understanding of
I should know
how it works, but
Okay.
yeah, the,
Okay, got it. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
So I don't see on previous drawings anything that looks like an outside air conditioner.
We have the,
Yeah, right.
so
Just saying.
they're there in the elevations, and then,
I know I saw them in the previous design.
yeah, they're in the
f-
elevation
first one.
drawings. And then they're called out on the floor plan too. But they're in that elevation drawing. So they were in the elevation drawing that was in the original submittal, and then I'll find it.
If, just posing a theoretical, if we do not allow the conditional use permits, how would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, it would be, so, well, I guess if it would be for the SRO or also additionally the houses. Already we ran into issue, which we weren't aware of, with the stairs counting twice in the single-family homes, and that retracted about 65 square foot or so, which almost ruined the whole design. And really, it's a flawed design as is, because we weren't ready for that. And, I mean, it's a functional house, don't get me wrong, but the, now the kitchen is only 9 foot wide instead of 10. It just really is very tight. So being that, we would have to go back and literally, for it to even make sense, it'd have to be 3 lots instead of 4 for those, and to expand the MFP, or PM, what is it,
MPFA.
MPFA. So it can be a functional residence with 3 bedrooms.
And what would you do with the SRO?
I haven't thought about that. I didn't know that would, I crossed that bridge when we got there, so.
How big are the bedrooms in the single families?
Um,
I'm just curious.
The master is slightly bigger.
Is it 10 foot?
Yeah, they're at least
Oh,
10
okay.
foot.
All right.
Yep, but it's mainly the kitchen that is gonna get,
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I look at this project, it seems like a 3-lot project, not a 4-lot project to me. I mean, you take it or leave it, but that's what it looks like to me. I don't know if it pencils at 3 lots, but I think it's more, it's easier. I guess it's an easier project.
It would make the houses more functionable, but I mean, I was kind of looking at it as, it's hard to find a brand-new house under like 600,000 anyways, and I thought it would be a good product,
I get it.
I don't think we could go down to 3, because then we would lose density, and accessory dwelling units don't count towards density, so it'd be a whole different project.
It would totally change.
It'd be completely different.
Absolutely everything.
We wouldn't meet density with 4, or with 3.
And the whole reason we were even doing this is because, I honestly wanted to rehab the building to start. And we got into it, and it just, doing the numbers, it's just a mess, it doesn't make sense. And then from there, we looked at doing the ADUs and this and that, and with the setback requirements, I forget exactly what it did.
20 feet.
That also didn't make sense. And this is what made sense, so. Sure.
Susan?
I also find it easier to imagine 3 larger homes with ADUs as a solution. But setting that aside, is there anything particular about the site or the technical aspects of building upon it that would justify the additional square footage, the additional MPFA for the homes, or is it a purely economic argument?
But like I said, that, to me, the kitchens wouldn't even be functionable. Like, we'd have to redesign the whole house. They wouldn't be three-bedroom houses. I don't think. And then, well, what's really killing us too is the garages. So even my designer was like, this never happens. Usually it's never, garages aren't habitable space. And that's getting counted against our MPFA. So, and the stairs are getting counted twice, which this is craziness, but that's what we're working with.
It's because you measure to the exterior of the buildings. So that's typically you don't measure houses like that.
Right. If that's what your rules are, that's what we're trying to conform to, but otherwise, like, if that wasn't the rules, we wouldn't have, we'd have bigger houses for sure, but I would be able to conform without the 25%. But with this, it would crush the project, to be honest. Sure.
Any commissioner have any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
We have one member of the audience who wishes to speak. Cynthia Barnard, would you come forward and introduce yourself?
Hi.
Chair Werner,
Thank you.
because the,
Excuse
she
me.
starts.
Excuse me, just a minute.
Because the applicant's already provided rebuttal, the conclusion of the public hearing would have occurred prior. But in this case, somebody presenting, you'll need to give the applicant an opportunity to rebut comments
After her.
from this individual.
Right, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't come prepared to do anything more than observe tonight as a neighbor. And walking by the condemned property, I didn't think it could get into such a condition as I saw from the inside. I live around the corner on Weimer Street. And I went through an extensive remodel with my house where I had to meet every criteria. I had an architect that walked us through. We met everything that was desired and tried to exceed where we would be fitting into a historic district. I'm not wanting to do anything other than be glad that that monstrosity and that condemned property was finally recognized for what it was. We're better off without it, even if it's just dirt. The tree of heaven, I also removed a tree of heaven. I was so crazy about the name, I thought it must be a wonderful tree. It's a tree from hell. So it's time for it to go. It has outlived its usefulness. Enough said. But thank you for your careful consideration of this. I live around the corner. I'd like for our neighborhood to stay historically important, and I know that's your aim as well. I'm not on historic preservation, but I'm friends with people that are wanting our neighborhood to improve. What I see brought to us today is scary. I'm concerned that there's really not adequate room for bike storage. I look when I go down Hersey Street and I see how the apartments are storing when they don't have storage. Their balconies are full of bicycles next to charcoal grills. People are doing crazy things with stuff. I'm not exempt from that. I'm guilty of it too, but I at least have a basement to tuck it away. And I just see what we are trying to do is find a place that's a comfortable place for people to live where they can afford it. What I see offered is a dorm room without a kitchen and without a central hallway to be able to access a kitchen from within their place where they live. Are they going to be toting microwave things back and forth? Are they going to be cooking on hot plates in their room instead? I don't see garbage being adequately addressed. For each unit, you're going to have a recycle bin and a garbage can Or are they all going to share? So I think there's a lot of more information that needs to be done by a professional architectural person that understands the water flows downhill. And mud does too. And when you're in a wheelchair and there's one access ramp to an elevation and something is blocking that access ramp because somebody might have a charcoal grill out on your deck, and you've got to get away from a fire that might be happening in the bedroom next door to you, you can't get down those stairs if you're in a wheelchair. You can get to the access. So I saw a lot of things tonight that made me concerned enough to put my fright of speaking in public aside. And thank you for your consideration of this project and how you might feel if you were a neighbor or if you needed housing. Would 17 by 14 answer your needs with a bicycle inside and it's raining and you've got a cat? I stand. And thank you so much for what you're doing. And there's just a couple of notes that Karen gave me. I see wheelchair ramp. Is there more than one exit from each apartment? Does that meet fire code? Or do you have to go through the window, which has a ADU, has an air conditioner in it? Is there a breeze that's going to come through these? I don't see but one window. It's hard to get a breeze going with your air conditioner not working, and you don't have the money to pay your electric bill. So I don't think it's going to be a place where I want to be. I had a dorm room like that one time. I used to cook grilled cheese with my iron. I don't think that's what we want people to be doing as our neighbor. Anyway, thank you for serving us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to offer a rebuttal?
Two U-Racks will be added. We're not quite sure where, but we will put bicycle parking for essentially 4 bikes on the site. And then trash and recycle will be shared in the city's just like basic standards. You have to screen your trash and recycle bins, either putting them in your garage or behind a screening fence. So something will be provided that will have their trash and recycle bins not visible from the public right-of-way.
Okay,
That's my rebuttal.
thank you.
Oh, and barbecue grills. His multifamily insurance doesn't allow tenants to have barbecues outside their units.
Does not?
It will not allow them to have barbecues on that porch outside those units,
Okay.
no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any? Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and close the record. So we are now into deliberations. Commissioners, what are you thinking?
I guess I'll start. You want to start?
I can start. Thanks, Chair Werner. Here in Ashland, we've decided that we want to maintain the integrity of our historic districts, and I think that it's been prudent that we have gone through these steps to address some of the concerns in the design. I think all housing is needed housing in Ashland, and I'm excited to support this project. And so I just wanted to add those words in discussion here as we work towards a motion.
Well, I'm not convinced that The front building, the SRO building, is historic preservation compatible. To me, it's too big, and especially if you're coming southbound on North Main Street, it really is, in my mind, the bulk is too big, the mass is too big, and I would like to see us not issue the conditional use permit for that particular lot. I think it's fine. I think the conditional use permit on the 3 single-family lots is okay. But I don't think it's appropriate for lot 4. That would be my offering. Susan?
So, and having recently sponsored an affordable housing forum for the city of Ashland, I would say that Commissioner Werner, Chair Werner and I are, absolutely supportive of wrestling with this situation for Ashland. So I'm going to ask a somewhat contrarian question, though, in terms of our decision-making authority. So I find lots of things wrong with this building, but I'm not sure, to Ms. Gunter's point, that they are egregious relative to the 6 factors of livability. People are going to cook in their units. People are going to spill out into the general area. I think those things are human nature in the way I see things. But as a planning commission, help me understand how that's our decision rather than the historical preservation advisory committee's decision or someone else's decision. Just asking.
To allow them, well, we don't have the ability to regulate whether somebody cooks in their room, if their room is only 325 square feet, or there is a kitchen on site. We don't have the ability to say you have to cook in the kitchen. We don't have the ability to say you can't sit out on the patio or the porch. You can't store anything out there. You can't dry your towels on the railing. And that's another issue is where are people going to go to wash things? Our purview is to look at the mass of the building, the roofing form, the mass, entrances, the scale, that kind of thing. And we can look at those things and we can make decisions based on those.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the issues that I see with the building and that have been articulated by various people and our purview based on the conditional use permit terms. But maybe I'm missing something, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because I would like very much to be able to say no personally to this project, but we need to do our duty as commissioners, is my thought.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the HPAC recommendations, it's my understanding that in a type 2 action under the historic development standards, the HPAC is advising us as the planning commission. It's not, that's not a source of decision authority. Rather, it's our decision to approve the conditional use permit or not. Now, with respect to the conditional use permit approval criteria, which is a separate section under the code, 18.5.4, there are the 6 livability criteria, but there's also an open-ended 7th criterion, which is anything that the decision body decides is important. And that's 18.5.4.050A3. Our deliberations have identified a few factors that I think are important in terms of livability and the suitability of this site for a conditional use permit. I'm very sensitive to the fact that there is a common kitchen that would only be accessed from the outside. I'm sensitive to the fact that there's no storage. I think it goes to livability in terms of how much you pay for rent and how much space you get. $1,000 a month for 325 square feet does not seem to me like affordable or efficient. So for those reasons, I think there's good grounds to be skeptical about the design of this building. However, I'm also mindful of the fact that people need to live indoors in this town. While the developer does not get to call this affordable, the 6 rooms can help. And because I think the transitional nature of this location in the historic district invites us to look at the building's architectural compatibility with the transition area and not with the interior of the neighborhood. I think that the factors that I just mentioned in terms of livability aren't actually enough for me to vote no. So that's it. Thank you.
Good point, Commissioner Jay. Yeah, affordability, I mean, for me, it doesn't really enter into the equation at all, and nor should it. It's about the conditional use permit to exceed the maximum permitted floor area in the historic district for each lot. Just a sidebar, I mean, a dwelling that's of this size collecting $6,000 in rent a month is, interesting. So, but I'm not factoring that in at all, just noted. I just think the application just lacks completeness towards the end here, and that frustrates me, and I can't see all the way through it, and I don't feel comfortable approving it with having questions, concerns not being addressed. I was hoping, given this project another month to sit with the Historical Society, we would have a finished final plan for some submittal here with some elevations and showing, for example, you brought up the air conditioning units, but the porch looks like it's only about 2.5, 3 feet wide. So you stick an air conditioning unit out in it, and it all becomes very difficult. It's not to scale. There's no retaining wall on Main Street. It just, to me, it just lacks completeness. So that's my opinion.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very well said by Commissioner Herron. I support everything that you have just said. I agree with you. I cannot support the conditional use permit, despite that I am wholeheartedly dedicated to more affordable housing, including naturally occurring affordable housing and first-time home buyer new homes. And just on a personal side, it's mainly that I don't think that the property as conceived and articulated is a good investment for the developer long-term. I don't think it's the highest and best use in terms of return on capital. Now, I can't vote based on that, but I don't think it's a good decision. So that's all I got to say.
Okay, so that's off topic, but okay, so we're of mixed mind. Susan?
Could we have reread that 7th condition that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's,
Didn't bring my code book.
sure, yeah, it's chapter 18.5.4.050. Subsection A, approval criteria. 3G. Threes and Gregory. Other factors found to be relevant by the approval authority for review of the proposed use. That's the seventh criterion. So I read that to mean whatever we want it to mean.
Thanks, Chair Werner. I guess if we could kind of explore this a little bit, if livability of this this building is something that we're struggling with, what conditions could we potentially put on this that fall within that that part of the code to increase the livability of the structure? Like, what are the things that we could say, hey, this is A, B, and C, and this would get us across the finish line potentially?
Redesign?
That would be one of them. Okay, so if we go down through the criteria, we can consider that. So first is similarity in scale, bulk, and coverage. So to my way of thinking, the front building doesn't meet those three criteria. For those of you who think that it might,
I don't think it does in the current design, but personally, I was comfortable with the statement in terms of the HPAC. What was the exact wording that was in here? That it yield a favorable recommendation from the HPAC.
well, I read their recommendation to be hesitant. I think they felt that the applicant had made some advances toward the criteria and the recommendations that they made the first time, but hadn't quite gotten there 100%. So I read their recommendation as being not fully supportive of what they were seeing, but saying it was sort of good enough, and we'll kind of fix it when we do the general review. And I'm not sure, I think that's a good idea. Seems too loose to me.
To the earlier comment, isn't G, other factors found to be relevant by the approval authority for review of the proposed use, given the comments made by other commissioners, including Commissioner Herron? Isn't that adequate for us to make a decision basis, or do we have to quote something A through F? That's my question.
Oh, no, I think we can use G.
We could use G. I mean, I think livability, completeness of design, safety concerns, ambiguity regarding, the overall site usage,
All the questions that we've had.
all the questions that have already been raised.
I think, I personally think we can use that as part of our criteria. Okay, make a motion.
I'd like to propose putting a motion on the table and see where we can get with that. Okay. I move to approve planning action PA-T2-2025-00065 for 431 North Main Street, including concurrent outline and final plan approval for the performance standards option subdivision, creating 4 lots, 4 conditional use permits to exceed the maximum permitted floor area in the historic district for each new home, approval to remove the significant tree identified in the record, and approval of the requested exception to street standards subject to the staff conditions of approval dated February 10th, 2026, and as amended on the record as follows. Incorporate the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee's additional committee recommendations dated February 4th, 2026 as conditions of approval for the project's final building permit drawings, particularly the Lot 4 SRO structure, consistent with HPAC's recommendation that these items are detailed enough to be conditioned and do not require additional HPAC review prior to review board consideration. I would also like to incorporate staff's recommendations to changes to the conditions of approval, and include the applicant's rebuttal explanation for bike parking, trash, and recycling be included.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion?
I'll just quickly voice support for the motion for the reasons that I previously stated. I think we need indoor living spaces, and this is a way to get them. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else have any discussion? Russell?
You know, I think all of our thoughts here were valid today. I think when we distill everything down, I still would like to see this move forward. I think we need the housing, and but there's still, you know, valid concerns about the project, and I'd like to say that I heard all of those today and appreciate that input.
Okay. Anybody else? Susan?
I would like to find a way to support this project, but I think that the flaws outweigh the strengths of the proposal as presented to us. The facts has been inconsistent from the first presentation to the second in terms of a variety of things. I appreciate the intent to develop more affordable, small case A affordable housing options, but I don't think that this is the right solution, and that therefore the other factors outweigh the benefits that I see in this particular project.
Okay, we will now take a vote. Michael, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Marr,
No.
Commissioner McCracken-Jen,
No.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Commissioner Herron,
No.
Chair Werner.
No. Okay, motion failed. Is there another motion to be put on the table?
Is it possible to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit 25% on the 3 single-family homes?
Sure.
Can you help me out with that? I don't have full board. I just modify the motion that he made
To say,
to just
4
say
lots,
for the
but
3
3
single-family homes, but not the front?
lot 4?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's my motion.
Michael, did you understand that? Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to have the previous motion with the deletion of Lot 4 as a CUP. Discussion? Yep, discussion. Wait, staff has a
Yeah, just
comment.
one point of order. The prior motion included Historic Preservation Advisory Committee recommendations related to the granting of a conditional use permit to Lot 4. So if the proposal is for a conditional use permit for lots 1, 2, and 3, but not for 4, it may be that those recommendations are no longer applicable.
Okay,
For
so
your
we should,
consideration.
so we should take them out of the motion? Okay. Will you take them out of the motion?
Good point, Brandon.
Okay, so it's the previous motion minus the CUP on Lot 4 and minus the HVAC's recommendations for the CUP on Lot 4. Does that get to it? Okay. And you'll second that? Okay. Comments, discussion? Susan?
I have to say I find it a very slippery slope where exceeding the lot size is an economic issue becomes an economic issue subject to profit maximization in our historical areas. To me, it's a very dangerous precedent to set. What's going to stop every developer from arguing that they should take advantage of that? If I were a developer, I would too. So that is a concern that I have with approving this.
Chair. I would have a problem approving something that the applicant didn't submit. I mean, to approve a motion to accept 3/4 of the project, that's not what they submitted. They submitted a full project. So when we allow for the separation of the subdivision and all that, like, how does this all fold in? They didn't apply to that. They didn't apply that. Why would we force them to build something or to build to a standard that they may not want to do? They didn't give us, if we're gonna approve the 3 homes that we like and not the 4th one, that's not what they're proposing today. So I don't even know if the applicant would be happy with a situation of that, and I don't care to bring them up and ask them at this point. It's their project. We are making conditions. We're saying delete, set 25% of what you're planning on, and come back to us with something else. I would find that might put them in a bad position, that they have to design 3 homes now that doesn't really work for them. That's my only concern.
Okay, so one possibility is to add the words "without prejudice" to the motion, so that we're denying the CUP for Lot 4 without prejudice, which would allow them to come back within a year if they want to come back with a redesign in order to reapply for the CUP on Lot 4. If we don't include the words "without prejudice," then by standard city law, they can only come back in a year, after a year has happened. So we could, in order to address your point of we don't know what their reaction is, we could add the words "without prejudice" in order to give them the leeway of coming back within a year, sooner rather than later, if they want to reapply for the CUP on Lot 4. Does that make sense?
It does. It's not, in my opinion, it doesn't meet the intention of their design, the motion to accept it, the 3 lots and not the 4th, and allow them to come back. So, yeah. And then before we vote on the motion, I would like to hear it reread, just so I understand it, because I really don't at this point.
Okay. So Okay, so why don't we have Michael reread what he thinks the motion is?
I do not have it word for word. I would request that Commissioner Phillips reread the motion with the amendments if possible.
Okay,
I can do that. So the amendments that we have on the table right now is that we are doing 3 conditional use permits for lots 1 through 3. Is that how I understand it correctly for the maximum permitted floor area?
and that's part of it, and then
And then
also,
what are the other ones? The tree
Well-
removal.
You want me to read what I have?
Yeah.
See if-
yeah, please.
So I have approved the planning action, including the 4-lot performance standard subdivision, 3 conditional use permits for lots 1 through 3 to exceed maximum permitted floor area, tree removal, and the exception to street standards, modifications to condition to speak to the driveway and garage orientation on the lots 1 through 3, but not addressing the other recommendations of historic. The staff recommended changes to 7A, 8A, addition of 8D, 10B, and then the applicant's proposals in terms of providing 2 U-racks for bicycle parking, shared trash and recycling enclosure that are screened, and no barbecues.
And AC that's covered.
The other thing that was mentioned during your deliberation was to deny the CUP on Lot 4 without prejudice.
Correct.
Did one of those address the sewer right away? Was there sewer right away?
In the staff recommended conditions in the prior review, it did incorporate recommended irrevocable consent for dedication for future street expansion, but I don't believe it addresses sewer.
And there was a condition about stormwater, but.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. We're in discussion.
Oh, sorry.
We're in discussion?
We're in discussion.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, to follow up on Commissioner Herron's point, would approving this preclude the owner and developer from coming back with a plan for 3 lots as opposed to 4?
No?
The motion would have to be an applicant could not move forward with an application as approved and apply for a different application, but they'd be in a position, unless that approval was done without prejudice, to wait a year to propose an alternative. So my understanding is, if the entire motion is without prejudice, the applicant could choose not to move forward with that approval, or move forward with that approval, or, as you know, provide a 3-lot subdivision and address other criteria like, minimum density and.
Okay, so the without a prejudice applies across, not just to Lot 4.
I had suggested that it apply to Lot 4 only, but if the will of the commission is to apply it to the whole motion, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Chair
I
Werner,
would
can I offer a
support
friendly
that.
amendment?
Yes, did I get your question? Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Can I offer a friendly amendment to make the entire pending motion without prejudice to the applicant?
Is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to make the entire motion without prejudice. Any discussion?
I think it's a great idea. We don't know what's on their minds. I would, if they have an idea that they can come back with something else other than just having to redo Lot 4, and they want to look at redoing the whole project, I'm all for that at this point. I would like to see, something useful happen there. And if we're not doing anything, that's not useful. So that's my thought.
Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to respond to Aaron's comment. I was operating under the impression, based on the applicant's comments, that this was a compromise for the applicant. If it is not, in fact, a compromise, then we may be looking at a new application. We'll see. But that was my operating assumption. Thank you.
Okay. So we vote on, go ahead.
Staff, so if we go through this process and approve this, they don't like the project, they don't have to accept it, and they can come back with the same application modified, again, with no time restraints, or what's the process? Can you explain that? Give me some.
In the event that
Options.
the commission approved the subdivision and the CUP for the lots 1 through 3, but not a CUP for lot 4, should the applicant, I'm going to give you two scenarios, should they move forward with that, they could complete that subdivision, have 4 lots, develop the 3 units of single-family units exceeding the maximum permitted floor area, and during that period of time, come back with an alternative proposal for lot 4. Alternatively, with a legal lot of record, they could develop that lot as a single-family home, meeting the maximum permitted lot area for that lot, and not be in a position to come back to the commission. In the alternative, if they wanted to submit an alternative proposal for a different lot arrangement than what was approved, they would have to come back for a subdivision modification of a previously approved subdivision. If they wanted to develop an alternative plan for lot 4, that still is the exact same plan as per your question, they could propose that because it was approved without prejudice, although this body is the body that made those recommendations, and they'd probably not see much value in that path. I can't speak for them, but.
No, thank you. And it just, staff has looked at no other options for a lot 4 to be a single-family dwelling, or where the driveway goes, or any of that at this point, because nothing was proposed. So setbacks and all of that for driveways and close to the corner, and just none of that has been reviewed at this point, because
If it's a lot of record, though, they can develop it, assuming they're not exceeding MPFA, they'd be able to develop it
assuming, okay.
with the building permit, and all those things would be looked at the building permit, not coming
Not
back.
planning, okay.
And they could potentially build a duplex on that lot, because if a duplex has got 2 units separated by 6 feet, they're not required to meet, one of them is not required to be included in the MPFA. So they do have options with the denial of the Lot 4 CUP still.
Thank you.
Question for staff, would a no vote on this motion maximize the applicant's options compared to a yes vote to subdivide 3 lots?
I would presume that a yes vote to provide the entitlement for subdivision would benefit the applicant because they could move forward with that path without delay. If there was a no vote, they would be at a position of having a singular lot with no approval with the demolition that they need to have a redevelopment plan for. So I think it would result in a delay of the demolition to deny the application in total. If you approve it, an applicant could decide not to move forward with the application that they'd had approved and submit an alternative application, again, if it was approved or denied without prejudice.
Okay, so it's the exact opposite of the way that I framed it in my question.
I think so.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry,
Thank you.
but I can't speak for the applicant, so.
One more clarification, because I don't have these memorized. The plans for the 3 homes, can someone refresh my memory on what their percentages were over as proposed? Because I do think that some of them were fairly marginal.
How much of the
How much they would exceed,
the MPFA,
yeah, the MPFA's.
well, they wouldn't,
You
As
know,
planned.
While Derek's looking for it, I recall that it was between 18 and 24%, but Derek will find the actual numbers. But the condition as recommended for approval establishes a no greater than 25%. So there was flexibility. If the
Okay, so
commission
they-
wanted to ramp it down, you'd have to provide specific square foot numbers.
Okay.
So Lot 1 was a 19.8% overage. Lot 2 was a 24.6% overage. Lot 3, 24.6. Lot 4, 22.4.
Thank you.
okay, so we vote on the amendment first. So, Michael, will you call the roll? And the amendment is to make the, without prejudice, apply to the whole motion.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner McCracken-Jen,
Yes.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Commissioner Herron,
Yes.
Chair Werner.
Yes. Okay, so the amendment passed. So now we're on to the full motion, which will now be without prejudice. Okay, is everybody clear on the motion? Okay, Michael, go for it.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner McCracken-Jen,
No.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Commissioner Herron,
No.
Chair Werner.
Yes. Okay, the motion passed. Thank you all for your diligent attention to this and your consideration of a lot of different moving parts. Okay, we are moving on to our next item on our agenda, which is, or is listed as, Planning Commission Officers Election. And I'm going to suggest that we continue this until we have the full commission in front of us, until all commissioners can be here to participate in the election of officers. Is that okay with everybody? Yes. Okay.
I have a quick question on that. Can it be done at a study session?
No.
Oh, I guess not.
Thanks, Brandon.
Okay, so we're going to wait until next March, or not next March, in March, to elect officers, and hope everybody's here then.
March 10th, exactly.
Yes, yes. And we'll move on to the sixth item, open discussion. Anybody have anything to discuss? Any new items to bring up?
I just
Russell?
have a quick question for staff. Recently, we've looked at some approvals where we have conditioned waiting until lot line adjustments have been made before issuing permits. And I'm wondering if there's a world, or excuse me, before we issue permits. And I'm wondering if there's a world where we, if the applicant owns both pieces of property and we don't want to delay construction or demolition or whatever, if there's a world where we can go ahead and allow them to proceed, knowing that at some point that will get
I think there are some circumstances in which the building permit would be issued for a development that clearly met all setbacks regardless of any boundary line adjustment. There's also circumstances where a boundary line adjustment is necessary in order to accommodate the future footprint of a building in order to meet setbacks. In those cases, the building official would not issue a building permit for those. However, typically, I think recent planning actions that have come before you where a boundary line adjustment was a prerequisite for development, the recording of that boundary line adjustment has already been approved by the city and needs to be approved by the county, and that's on the applicant's timeline to get that done. But we would issue site clearance permits, grading and excavation. It's just the building permit for a foundation of a building would have to be relative to final property lines. And if the property line movement is necessary to accommodate that building's footprint, again, that's why that condition has been added. Derek, did you have anything on?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would clarify is we have provisions in the land use code that say we can consider contiguous properties under the same ownership as one for planning purposes, but that doesn't get to the building code separation from property line. So that's, as Brandon said, where it would come into play is making sure that they're meeting building code.
Got it. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to bring up? Who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
And who would like to second that? Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for a long, arduous evening. Yeah.